Hi, I'm Wanda Whitaker with Anchored in Spirit and the Racial Reconciliation Project. The Racial Reconciliation Project is a series of online workshops entitled Free Yourself First, A Journey of Healing and Action for White Folk, facilitated by Peter Rubin, Galen Logan Jr., and myself. It is a place for white people to feel safe while coming to a place of atonement through contemplative learning and practices. It also helps raise funds for Village Connect, a nonprofit organization based in San Leandro, California, that provides sustainable and positive transformative services for the mostly Black and Brown community. For more information, please visit Village Connect at www.village-connect.org. The virtual workshops take place August the 8th, 15th, and 22nd from 2:30 until 5 o'clock p.m. Pacific Standard Time. And today we'll be having a conversation on the issue of race with two friends of mine, Shelley Bradford Bell and Carol Williams. I'm calling it Strength in Black and White Friendships. Shelley is originally from the South Side of Chicago, where she arrived in San Francisco nearly 30 years ago and has climbed the ladder of success, winning many community awards and served on several community boards, and has earned high status as the Vice President of the San Francisco Environmental Commission and President of the San Francisco Planning Commission. She says that she's been able to help resolve racial issues in small ways from the inside, but she's also been very angry and frustrated at how people of color are most often ignored in quality of life issues. She would like for us to find common ground and move forward as one race, and that is the human race. Carol Williams is currently retired and living in San Francisco. For over 40 years, she worked in sales and marketing in the broadcast field, television, radio, and cable, across the country, where she specialized in multicultural marketing and sports sponsorship. In her past, she's worked on the launch of BET, that's the Black Entertainment Television, in New York, and was an account executive at KSOL Radio, KSOL, in San Francisco, which later became Wild, attracting an audience that was predominantly Black. So, ladies, Shelley, you state in your bio that you attended Drew Elementary in Chicago, and after an experience with your first white friend, you were awakened to the true tragedy of Dr. Charles Drew. Could you tell us a little bit more about that?
Well, you know, when you're in elementary school, they always tell you the history or the biography of the person the school is named after. We had a big photo of Dr. Drew next to the principal's office in the hall. And, you know, he is the founder, creator of plasma, a life-saving creation, medical creation. He, later we found out that he died after a car accident because he needed plasma, but the hospital they took him to did not take care of colored people, as they said back then. And he died needing the one thing that he created. That didn't really resonate. It's kindergarten through fifth grade. Didn't really resonate with me as much then. But later, my grandmother moved to a predominantly white neighborhood. She lived in the path of what is now the Dan Ryan Freeway, and through eminent domain, the city had taken a vast piece of the middle-class Black neighborhood and mowed it down to put in the freeway, and she was one of the victims. They moved to a house, and Kathy Mason lived a couple of doors down, and she, my sister, and I, we were like the best of friends, inseparable. And one day Kathy said, you're Black and I'm white. We might have been 7, I don't know. You're Black and I'm white. And the next thing we know, my grandmother had hit the door with her feet, told her to go home and never come back. And we weren't allowed to speak to her again. And we were like confounded because, you know, she was white and we were Black. I mean, as far as we were concerned, we got it in a way that I think only kids got it. And that night, when my father came to pick us up, he sat us down in the back seat of the car and explained to us all about race. And that next day when I went to school and I saw the picture of Charles Drew, Dr. Charles Drew, I said, wow, they let him die. So that was kind of my awakening to race. And, you know, unfortunately, Kathy's grandmother explained to her what she had done innocently. And she came back and apologized, and we tried to recreate the friendship, but the existence of race became a wall between us. And we might have, you know, played together 3 or 4 more times, and then we would see her from afar.
Wow.
That's an interesting conversation, because recently on Facebook, I posted a question to people who went to Sir Francis Drake High School in Marin, which is now known as high school. And, you know, they took his name off of the high school, and because it turned out he was a slave trader. So I wanted to know if people who went to Sir Francis Drake had been told Sir Francis Drake's history. And the people I heard back from said no.
Wow. Wow. So Carol, I want to ask you a question as well, just before we really get started. And that is, I'm looking at your past references and your past bio, and it makes reference to the fact that you were a white woman selling commercial time or airspace at a mostly Black station, radio station. It was K-Soul and Wild Radio. I kind of remember that. It really attracted a large Black audience. So how was it for you?
Well, one of the people I worked with one time after I was confronted with one of those questions, came back and said, I wish every white person had the opportunity to experience things that you have. And Shelley and I have, well, I'll answer that question. I would sit in front of somebody in an office, and my name is Carol Williams, which is a common Black name as well. And they would be expecting a Black person. And so I would come in, introduce myself, sit down, and they would say, what are you doing here? But Shelley and I have a story. We were working on this conference sometime in the 90s, I guess, 80s, late 80s,
Yeah.
90s.
Northern California Environmental Expo.
And part of the expo was to introduce companies to minority groups as a hiring pool. So I called this major bank, whose name I'm not going to mention, and I said, this is an opportunity for you to meet people from minority communities for hire. And she said to me, I'm sorry, we only hire qualified candidates. And I said, I didn't say they were not qualified.
Wow. You know, Carol,
And she was so, the thing about it was, that was one of those moments in our friendship where you knew that she totally got it, because I heard her on the phone. You know, we're bringing in minority businesses to get involved in environmental work. And she said, I didn't say they weren't qualified. I said they were minority. And the woman just kept repeating it. And next thing I heard is Carol said, I'm going to hang up now because you're making me angry. And she hung up the phone, and she was so angry she had to go outside and smoke a cigarette. And I remember I said, welcome to my world. She was so angry. You know, so that was one of those moments. I mean, we have a lot of moments where we have we're totally synced. I have very few, if any, outside of the statues, where Carol and I didn't like immediately see this from the same perspective. Our color had nothing to do with it, you know, and matter of fact, I call her WCW because I do know Black Carol Williams from Carol Williams Advertising. So I call her WCW. And that's an
interesting thing to discuss, because at the time we first met, she had two friends named Carol Williams. She had me, and she had this other Carol Williams who, I wish I was that Carol Williams. She owns an advertising agency. She, you know, a lot richer than I am. Anyway, so in order to separate us for her friends,
Right.
you know, we started calling me WCW, which stands for White Carol Williams. And so recently her niece and her son, well, her niece said, oh, I'm glad we're discussing this because that always bothered me that we called you White Carol Williams. And but you never seemed to be upset about it. Well, it made perfect sense.
That's it.
And, you know, her said, well, you know, well, that was just to distinguish her from the black. There's a BCW too.
Well,
Yeah.
that's quite funny. It's interesting because Carol, you and I have similar backgrounds. And when I first came to San Francisco, I came from WHUR Radio, which was a black radio station, and went to work at a country western station.
Yes, I know.
KNEW,
That's where
KSLL
I
radio, KNEW radio. And I was approached too the same way by one of my clients. And she asked me, how could you, as a black person, sell country western radio?
Yes,
And I said, I love country western. But she became one of my best clients. So how did you guys meet?
We met at KSOL, and
Because of you, Wanda. Because of you. Yeah. Coca-Cola.
Oh, that was a bridge builder.
Yeah, when Coca-Cola called you and you couldn't take the contract because they were in South Africa and you were part of Global Exchange, so you couldn't work for them, you referred them to me. Right. And that's the Coca-Cola Black History Month contest. I said, you know, we're gonna get that scholarship for some black young person who's gonna end up being a lawyer that ends apartheid, you know, and then that's how I met Carol. So, you know, you brought that about.
That was the universe that brought that about, synchronicities. But at any extent, I know that you guys have been friends for a very, very long time. We're talking years. And so what has made the friendship long lasting?
Golly, the fact that, you know, I learned something every time I talked to her. Hopefully she learned something from me. We have shared lives, shared friends, shared food, and changes in our lives. As you know, I left and went to Arizona for 10 years. And we were able to maintain the relationship over that period of time as well. So that when I came back to San Francisco, we've been to Paris together.
Yeah, when I got my apartment in Paris in 2001, and I went off, Carol came with me to help me celebrate my new life in Paris. And so we had dinner, and some of the photos I may have sent you, Wanda, are us toasting with champagne at my apartment, toasting with champagne in the restaurant, toasting with at the top of the Eiffel Tower at the Versailles together. It just, we have this, it's a very loving connection. I love Carol from the bottom of my heart. She is my sister in every way. I mean, we're birthday twins. Birthday twins. She's March the 4th. I'm March 5th. So I tell her I go to Paris simply so our birthday can be on the same day. Since Paris is 9 hours ahead, it's still March the 4th in San Francisco. So I do her that favor. I go to Paris for her birthday. Yeah, but you know, it's just it's just magic. I mean, it's just, we have a friendship that started the day we met in that office for the Coca-Cola contest. And it's never diminished.
And there are lots of things that we disagree on, or like Shelley brought up the statues when they were tearing down the statues. This is a month or so ago, and that really bothered me. And she told me her point of view, why they needed to be taken down. And because she told me that, I did some investigation and found out more about where these Confederate statues came from. And I am still conflicted about statues. I have no particular, I mean, there's no statue that I love and would fight for, but the whole concept of taking down statues without any kind of thought behind it, you know, just kind of tearing them down bothered me. You know, I believe that they should be taken, a lot of them should be taken down. Mm-hmm. And I understand why they should be taken down now, but without that conflict with Shelley, I would not have understood it.
And
does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes sense, and it's very, very important, especially when you have friendships that are different racially. If you can just be brutally honest, and I know Shelley is a brutally honest person.
I don't know what you're talking about. I work so hard not to be me.
So I know how difficult it can be to listen, but she does have a way of making you listen to what she has to say. And so, and saying that, I know you two come from two very different backgrounds. And so, how were you raised? I'm going to start with you, Carol. How were you raised, and how did those beliefs and what happened to you in childhood impact the way you feel today or throughout your life? Because I know that your background is very different than Shelley's. And I'm going to ask you about your background.
Too.
Yeah, right.
But on the other side.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
And believe me, at least at that time, there was a line in Chicago where you went, you know, you were either from the south side or the north side. And I was a north sider. My mother's first, one of her first memories of me is being at a train station in Chicago, and she's got me thrown over her shoulder, and my arms are out going da 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 as to a black man walking behind her. And that was one of her first memories that she gave me. But from having been born in the metro area, we moved to the suburbs after that, and there were no black people. There were no people of color. Some Asians, mm-hmm. until I went off to college. And actually, I've had that conversation with a friend that I went to high school with. And I said, I knew where you grew up. You know, we had no exposure to black people when we were in high school. So she told me about some of the experiences she had. She came home from some kind of youth group thing. There was a black guy in the car, and her mother said to her, "We're going to have to leave the neighborhood. We're going to have to move." And she said, "Because I was riding in the car with a black man."
Oh, wow.
And it wasn't really until I got into college. But my father taught me that I should not judge people for how they look, but who they are.
And you kind of stuck with what your father
and my mother, mm-hmm. as Shelley knows, was very biased, but she is a white person who didn't think she was prejudiced at all. And if you asked her, you know, I've confronted her in situations about being prejudiced, and she would say, I was very nice to that person. I said, well, why wouldn't you be nice to that person? That is not what makes you not prejudiced against that person. So she never did really understand what it was, and she didn't think she was, but she was. Does that make sense to you?
It makes a lot of sense, Carol, and I'm sure that it makes a lot of sense to a lot of people who are viewing this. I'm sure they have similar backgrounds and can really relate to what you're saying in a big way. And Shelley, I know that you have been raised a certain way as well. So I want to know, as far as your background is concerned, how were you able to overcome or be accepting of other races? Because
Well,
your friendships are quite broad.
yeah. My mother had, I just lost her April 2nd, at 94 years old. She had the biggest heart. She could absorb the universe in her heart. It was so big. And she always believed in people. And she was the first African American woman to win a 4-year scholarship to study architecture at the Art Institute of Chicago. And so, of course, she's surrounded by white people. When she couldn't really hack the drafting part of it, she left and she joined the secretarial force with the military. She was I have a picture of her. She's the only Black person in like a class picture. It's all the staff. She's the only Black person on the staff. And she's in the middle. I said, I'm really having a hard time finding which one is you, Mommy. Which one? I don't know who you are, but she's always with such grace. She was always about people. She always opened her heart, and that's what she taught me. And my father was always the angry Black man. And so he always taught me what I'm going to call the reality of life for Black folks. When we grew up on the south side of Chicago, we had to pass through Beverly Hill Park to go to Evergreen Plaza, and you leave home, you feel safe, you cross Vincennes, and all of a sudden, you're getting called out of your name, and you better be in a car, so, it's certain places you couldn't go. And so my mother and father, kind of like Carol's mother and father, were the balance. I learned each side of who I am, and I learned how to be proud of both sides of who I am. And so I'm very comfortable in my father's way of telling you exactly what I think, but he never thought before he said it. My mother was Grace, so I've learned how to combine those two, to be honest with my feelings in a little bit more graceful way than my father would have done it.
Well, another interesting, this year for Martin Luther King's birthday, Shelley and I celebrated Martin Luther King Day together. And it was one of our last outings before COVID hit. And we went and met at where did we go?
Was that our restaurant in Glen Park, or?
No, it was on Market Street.
We went to the that art gallery on Market Street, right? And
Yeah.
something else. We did two things. Yes, I don't remember. I'm old.
So it was interesting because we were both still living in Chicago at that time. I'm almost 10 years older than Shelley. So my experience was, as an adult, I was in my 20s, the day that Martin Luther King was shot. So we shared our experiences of the day that Martin Luther King was shot. She was home with her family. And when she told her story, I was very glad I wasn't in her neighborhood. Her brother
You would have been safe. We weren't allowed out, okay? We're from Chicago. Richard Daley told the Chicago police on the 6 o'clock news, for every Black person you see, shoot first and ask questions later. We were on a dusk to dawn curfew. But actually, and my father was in tears, and I felt bad. I was 13, and I remember looking up at the picture he had of MLK on the wall, having just won the Nobel Prize. And I'm like, who is he, or the Nobel Prize? And I said, who is he? I didn't really understand, right? Mm-hmm. And then that next weekend, when the rioting stopped, we went to Operation Breadbasket, and I saw Jesse Jackson, and I got Saturday at Operation Breadbasket became church for us. And I felt so liberated. I bought the book, Look Out Whitey, Black Power is Gonna Get Your Mama. And I bought all of those Black rage books, and then Black history books. And I really started to embrace and try to understand why do you hate me? Because I'm such a cool girl,
Right.
So that was kind of the beginning for me. Martin Luther King's assassination was the beginning for me coming to my realization. And I do remember one little last thing. I remember my mother saying to me, I remember my father coming home one time. We were probably 4 or 5 years old. And he said, come, let's go to the beach. And so we laughed. My mother's like, okay. So, Black Beach in Chicago was 67th Street. My father took us to Rainbow Beach. And I didn't know it. I was too young to understand it. So I asked my mother years later, I remember being at the beach and surrounded by police sitting in lawn chairs, saying, you walked us up to the water and the police came with you while you played with us in the water and then walked us back. And she gave me that Yvonne Bradford look. And she said, your father, there had been a riot at Rainbow Beach because 2 Black men had gone there and it was a white beach. So they got beat up and the riot broke out. And my father came home from work and said, we going to Rainbow Beach. So that's what we did. He drove it. That's the way my father confronted everything. And that's one thing from him I'm glad I got. So years later, when we moved from Princeton Park we moved to a house 1 block from Rainbow Beach. And my father said, if white people are going to fly out, white flight, it's going to happen, they're going to have to swim to get away from me. And we lived 1 block from Rainbow Beach.
Don't you think it's interesting the name of the beach was called Rainbow
Beach? You know what? Until this moment, I never thought about that.
Yeah.
Wow.
And I have never heard of Rainbow Beach before.
See, you guys have 2 different experiences coming from the same city, right?
The same city, same day. So I was out with a friend driving around. We heard on the radio that Martin Luther King was killed. She came and dropped me off at my house, and I lived on the near north side of Chicago. And so it was a very mixed neighborhood. At that time, it was the most successfully integrated neighborhood in the country. It was about 1/3 Black, 1/3 white, and 1/3 Asian. I lived a block away from the Buddhist temple. And so I got home, we're trying to find out on the news what's happening. My neighbor came over and said, why don't we all stay together? Because they were shooting in my neighborhood too. And so we go to my neighbor's house, and my mother calls and she goes, your father's sending your father to get you, get you out of that neighborhood. And I said, I'm okay, I'm fine. You can't drive into my neighborhood, and I'm at Charlie and Judy's. She goes, are you out of your mind? They're Black. I go, they are more afraid than I am. They go outside, they for sure are going to be shot. We're just staying in, we're fine. And so that was my, I went through 3 major riots in 1 year: Democratic Convention, Martin Luther King, and one other that I have lost track of in the recent times. And they literally took place in my living room. And that's the year I decided to move to San Francisco, where they had riots. My mother thought it was all my fault. I must have been leading them on.
You're the organizer.
They say there's 6 degrees of separation. Carol, you live 1 block from the Buddhist temple, and you live 1 block from Rainbow Beach. I kind of like that. Then you came to San Francisco and met each other synchronistically.
It was,
and even though our Chicago's were 2 whole different, we could have been living in Washington and Florida for as much similarity.
Neither of us could go to the other one's neighborhood without being seriously hurt.
Yeah.
So what do you think what do you think are the strengths from the relationship? I know that there are challenges, but what are the strengths from the relationship that you've been able to have over the many, many years? I know I know it's rich, and I know it's a rich friendship, but
it's not based on race, it's not based on business, it's not based on or money. It's not on anything like that. It's that I have something I like to do, and I know Carol would like to do it. Like we have this one habit we call going out to dinner, but we're really going out to nosh. And we'll go to a restaurant, we'll get some champagne, some foie gras, some, cheese. And we never do dinner, but we do every appetizer on the thing. And we just sit and nosh and laugh and talk. And it's authentic. We have an authentic friendship. There's no trying to force it.
I remember, speaking of lunch, and I think I gave you a picture of that Ron Potter had laminated. One of my favorite things to do was go to Limantour Beach and have oysters. Mm-hmm. So I invite Shelley to go, and Shelley is the only Black person who was invited, but I didn't think twice about it. Nobody that was there thought that, there was no. So she goes, gee, I don't know if I like oysters. I said, well, just come and try them. So we go to the beach. We stop at Johnson's Oyster Farm. We buy the oysters. We take them down to the beach. And that was Shelley's first oyster. What is one of your favorite things now, Shelley?
Oysters. You take me someplace
I can't stand
raw
them.
oysters.
Oh my
God. If you go to say Oyster Place in North Beach, not E&J, something like that, I go there and the guy says, so 2 dozen oysters for you, and what else would anybody else? He doesn't even ask me what I want because he knows I absolutely love oysters. It was mind-blowingly wonderful experience. Of course, now I'm vegan mostly, and I can't eat an oyster, so it's just good memories.
I like pearls.
I don't like pearls.
Well, there you go.
Look, I'm just not a pearl kind of lady,
Yeah, you don't like black pearls? Black pearls are wonderful.
When we went to Hawaii, my son got black pearls in his oyster shell, and they were beautiful. And I thought, wow. Oh, my son is going to make me some earrings. And he got my grandmother's some earrings because he was raised by my great grandmother mostly. So he immediately had them made for grandmother Gertrude. And I'm like, I want to be mad, but how can you be mad?
Oh, and by the way, I yell at her son all the time. Hey,
wonderful.
Yeah. And he goes, hi, Carol.
I can tell you guys are really fond of each other.
Very
can you tell us a story about when you have spoken up against maybe a racist remark or action when in the company of your own racial group?
Well, I remember visiting my parents in Houston, Texas. I hate to tell the story. I was visiting my parents in Houston, Texas, and I went down the street to meet friends of theirs, and they were all upset. And they were upset. Someone had stolen their car. And so they had just found out from the police that they found the car again. And so the man of the house says, I don't want that car back. What if a Black person has sat in the seat of that car?
Wow.
And I can't remember my exact words right now, but I got up and I left. And even though they were my parents' best friends or whatever, and I never saw those people again. And I can't remember exactly what I said, but I'd never heard anybody say anything like that before.
I've heard so many and responded to so many that the only thing I can really pick out, and it isn't black and white, but this whole COVID thing and everybody calling it the China virus and all the attacks on Chinese. And, a Black person says something to me about, those nasty Chinese. And I said, yeah, I know. They like them nasty Black people eating fried chicken and chitlins. And he's like, why would you say that? I said, because that's how you're stereotyping Chinese people right now. I said, you don't ever want somebody to say that about us. You should not be saying it about them. We have no idea where the disease came from. And even if it did come from China, you have no right being hateful to an entire group of people, you know? So I've said it in that case. I've said it when went to white people. You know, my father's a little nuts. He was, I should say. God rest his crazy soul. He down there somewhere having a party in hell. But he was on the street one time talking to a friend, and the guy, a white man, walked between them, their conversation. And my father grabbed the white man by the back of his coat and pulled him back and said, "You're supposed to say, 'excuse me,' when you pass through someone's conversation, and you didn't do it because we two Black people." And he said, "I'll let you go when you say 'excuse me.'" And the man said, "Oh, well, pardon me." And my father let him go. And, you know, he's called my father a name over his shoulder when he was far enough away to run. But that's who I was raised by. My father did not allow you to even do a subtle racist thing without bringing it up. And so I tend to do that a lot to people, you know.
Should I tell the yellow suit story at the dance, Shelley?
Okay, because I don't remember it, but go ahead.
I told you the story. I was at some party or dance, a place with music, dancing, and I was with my friend Vicky. And this guy came over to me and asked me to dance. And the guy had on a hat, you know, this huge big yellow hat. He had a banana yellow suit on, and he had, like, everywhere he went, there were like this whole troop of guys that went after him. So he comes over to me with this little team and he said, you know, dance. And I said, "No, thank you." And he walks away, and Vicky said, "You know, don't you feel prejudiced?" And I said, "No." You know, I would have, if it had been a white guy or a pink guy or a purple guy with that kind of attitude, I would have no interest in dancing with him. And I didn't feel prejudice.
And see, that's there is right there, kind of describes our relationship in Carol. Carol looked at the demeanor of the person, the arrogance, the outfit, the posse, and she wasn't interested. She didn't look at the color. But Vicky, the first thing Vicky said was, "Don't you feel prejudiced?" Because the first thing she saw was a Black person. Carol doesn't see a Black person first. She sees a human being first. And you either become somebody she doesn't want to be around, or you become her best friend for 30 years. And we can talk about anything and everything and have these kind of conversations and say, Carol has this thing I love. "Well, you know, Shelley Bell, I just wanted to say, I just felt a little bit," and then whatever came after that, we have a discussion about it. She's trying to let me know that something I did hurt her or confused her or whatever it was, and she wants to talk about it. And we can always talk about it, you know? So that's about anything. It crosses race. It's love. This is a relationship of pure friendship and love. And if everybody could just do that, I mean, what a great world this would be.
Oh, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
So we could leave on that note, or I'd like to leave on a note of, what is your wish for humanity?
Oh, golly, that's an easy question. My father always thought that one day, this is, you know, somebody who would have been 102 yesterday. He always thought that eventually we would all be one color. You know, if time went on long enough, that the whole world would all be, there wouldn't be one race or another race. He thought that, you know, as time went on, there would only be one color and one people. And he truly believed that.
Did he pick a color? I'm just, will we all be Black, or will we all be white, or will we all be Asian, or will we be, you know, crystal clear? You know?
Well, I don't know about you guys, but I want a rainbow beach.
Yeah.
I want all colors, like, you know, beautiful rainbow.
You want to see the rainbow.
Yeah.
Yes.
I like the beaches with the umbrellas that have different colors. They're so wonderful.
Those are the beaches of Paris and France, rather, I should say. Go to Deauville and Touville, and you'll see the red and the blue and the yellow and the stripes. And oh, I'm in Paris.
Let's go.
Oh, let's go now. Can we get somebody to let us out of the country? I want to get out of the country. No, I would say one of the things that I've always felt is you can't know light if you don't know dark. You can't know good if you don't know bad. And I said this to you, Wanda, and I said, you know, Obama was the light. You know, he brought people together. I mean, if you really look at it, Obama was the first in bringing all races and all colors and all religions together, because there's no way he would have won with just the Black vote. It was a universal, global, loving thing, and truly global. I mean, when I went to France, I went to Paris one year right after he won, and the customs agent just looked at the cover of my passport and said, "Congratulations on Obama." He never opened it up and see if it was me. I mean, they were just so proud and so happy that he was the president. He brought about a global experience of love. And then now we have the darkness, right? And we all understand now why we have to come together, why what Obama started is so important, why how we have to continue to love one another and be together as a group. Put aside the BS. Let's just be together and unified. And then we're going to get rid of this darkness. This, I truly feel from the bottom of my heart, no matter how bad the dark night tries to steal this election, that people are going to come together in such a strong and powerful way. And I hope that this isn't just a fad for some folks of trying to understand that Black Lives Matter, that they can see in people like Carol and myself that when you really work at it, you can have loving and beautiful friendships across cultures. And so what I'm hoping for the world is that this is an awakening to love.
Well, and this is something you and I talk about this every single week. We talk about the power of voting. You know, we encourage people to vote. We encourage everybody to vote.
Yes.
There are many ways to vote. This is going to be a challenging election. And so we're trying to get truthful information out to as many people as possible. Yeah. About how important it is not to, you can stay home and vote by mail. You know, you don't have to, you can still shelter in place or whatever you're comfortable with.
And Carol is usually a poll worker, and because of all of this, she can't be at a polling place. But right now they're hiring people as young as 16 years old to work the polls. And when you think about all the TikTok kids that disrupted the Tulsa convention, I think that we already see that we have young people who are already, I would say, embraced in a movement of equality. And so I'm very hopeful. I'm very hopeful. And I hope that once we can all hug each other again, you know, I remember going out for the We Are the World and all of us holding hands. I would love to have a moment like that. I have so many friends I want to hug again, and I'd like to hug a few strangers too.
So go. That's our solution. You must vote.
Well, yeah, pollworkers.org. Pollworkers.org. There you go.
When you post on Facebook or whatever, please go vote and vote by mail, so much of those biased people, I mean, they really come out during those statements.
But you got to look beyond that, because that's pain and stupidity and ignorance, you know. And if you try to look beyond ignorance and what a person was taught, I used to always say my father couldn't teach me Chinese because he didn't know it. He taught me what he knew, and I'm grateful for that. But I also understand I have to educate myself beyond the limitations of his knowledge. And a lot of people aren't like that. You know, they got that old story about cutting off the ends of the roast to put it in the oven. And The woman always did it. And when she asked her mother why, she said, because the oven wasn't big enough for to fit the whole roast. So I cut, and she thought it had something to do with cooking the roast. And I think a lot of people who sat around dinner tables, because we come from a time when we sat at home and had dinner as a family, they were miseducated about race and culture and other people, and they were taught biases that they now are going to hopefully unlearn.
Well, you know, progress is like a mighty wind. You can't stop it.
No.
Good.
You cannot, and you will not. It will happen. And I'm very optimistic that we will live in such a place where all races are recognized as part of humanity, and the values of human kindness, the values of compassion and empathy will rise above all others. And that
Yes.
is part of our core selves. That's part of who we really are.
Yeah.
And we'll delight in the joy and the happiness
Together.
together. And it's okay, ladies, it's been quite a pleasure to have a conversation. Thank you for joining this conversation on race issues, part of the Racial Reconciliation Project and the online virtual events that are happening August 8th, 13th, and 22nd. We hope to see you there. And if you want to register, go to the website www.village-connect.org. And again, we thank you for joining us once again for Conversations on Race Issues. Thank you, ladies.
Thank you.